2 because apparently was not recording on my phone that whole time, and that is marginally very upsetting. So I hope it's still recording this time, or I will just turn this into a podcast. So if you're listening to this and there's no video, then that means I got frustrated and just turned it into a podcast. Yeah. Anyways, we're talking about Walpole. Specifically, Walpole's Mysterious Mother, which was a play. Weird play. But first, who was Walpole? He was the author of Castle of Otranto. One of the first, if not the first, Gothic novel. He's kind of considered the founding father of Gothicism, which Gothicism is the direct opposition to Romanticism, which mostly dominated, think Jane Austen books, Pride and Prejudice. I was going to say Jane Eyre, but don't think about Jane Eyre at all, actually. Just think about, like, Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. That is Romanticism. Ladies fainting on couches. Gothicism, in its direct opposition to Romanticism, made it weird, made a lot of things weird, especially the romance, because it was supposed to be opposite of Romanticism, which romantic, falling in love at first sight. He is diving into a lake shirtless. I see you, Darcy. And that created unconventional relationships, and specifically in this play, unconventional reproduction, which you will learn later what makes the reproduction in this play unconventional. So, that is Gothic literature and Gothicism, which needs to be studied more because it's weird. We need to study more of the weird Gothic literature. We don't study enough weird Gothic literature as a society. We mostly study, like, the regular Gothic literature, Frankenstein, Dracula, Castle of Otranto, which I haven't read, but I think it's weird, probably because Walpole's a weird dude. So, we are talking about Mysterious Mother. Part of Gothicism is that it touches on emotions that are negative, like sadness and grief and stuff, which is mostly what this play is. It's a lot of sadness, it's a lot of grief. I don't really know how this play is supposed to make you sad, but it's supposed to make you sad. So, here are the people who make up this play. We have the Countess. She's a mother, a widow. She is so sad that she's been grieving for 16 years. That's a lot of years she's been grieving. Some say she would still be currently grieving in this day, but she's doing a lot of grieving. Edmund, her son, who was banished 16 years ago, he is a soldier, and he doesn't really know why his mom hates him. Side note, the Countess hates him. We have the orphan Adeliza, who is most definitely an orphan. She is the most orphany orphan to ever orphan, and she's 16. There's no reason why she's 16. Wink. We have Florian, who's Edmund's best friend, who seems a little, just a little, what do you do with that hand? He's just a little fruity. How can you not be fruity with a name like Florian? A man named Peter, a couple friars. I don't know their names. They're important, but I don't really care about them. Some ladies who I will not mention again. They're just some ladies. They're there. They do something. I'm not sure what it is, but they do something. And more orphans. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog breathing while she sleeps. But we open with Florian talking about how creepy this estate is that's empty, and there's not really life living within it. There's no hustle and bustle. It's just sad. The grounds are just sad. Everything about it is sad. He's talking to the man named Peter about how great Edmund is. And the man named Peter knows Edmund is the banished son. And so the man named Peter is telling Florian, like, he's been banished for sleeping with a maid the night after his dad dies. The night after his dad died. That's why the Countess banished him 16 years ago. And he also just kind of doesn't care that apparently Florian is like, yeah, he's with me and we're besties. I'm so not in love with him at all. I'm just going to talk a lot about how he's such a great soldier and how he saved my life so many times. And yes, they're not in love. No, they're not. Ever. They can't be. Anyways, the Countess just kind of wanders across like the courtyard of the estate where everyone can see her really creepily with like her veil, her mourning veil, because she's been mourning for 16 years, a crucifix, and like some tissues. It says tissues, so I'm not assuming a box of tissues, like a Kleenex box, but I'm gonna think about a Kleenex box every time I imagine it. And it's not very needed, like she doesn't need to do that, but it is so incredibly iconic that she just walks as slowly or fast across the stage as you want, just holding a cross and some tissues. Specifically imagine a crucifix and a Kleenex box, like one of those brightly colored Kleenex boxes. Like everything else is like dark and moody, and then there's just like a bright blue Kleenex box and a crucifix. The Countess goes on to tell one of the friars that she wishes her son was dead. It's pretty out of pocket. She might not actually want him dead, but I have interpreted it as she wants him dead. She's tells the friar that she hopes her son is dead. And he's like, why? And she's like, I've committed so many crimes, and he's one of the victims of my crimes, and I hope he's dead. Yikes, right? I'm not actually sure that's how that conversation goes. I'm just going to say that's how it went. Edmund talks to Florian, and he is confused on why his mom hates him. He is always confused about why his mom hates him, because there is no way she could have known that he slept with the maid Beatrice. That is the maid's name. Her name is Beatrice. She gets a name. The friars don't get names. They're jerks. But Beatrice, she is the maid that Edmund slept with the night after his dad died, which got him kicked off. He got kicked out because of sleeping with this maid. And he's confused about like how his mom knew, because she was grieving so much. I mean, his dad just died. Of course she was grieving. He probably should have been grieving too. But men. That's all I'm going to say. Men. He also mentions the orphan Adeliza, who he's been talking to. Adeliza is the Countess's favorite orphan, so they hang out. They're besties. They hang out. She's 16. Not that matters. It doesn't matter that she's 16, but she's 16, and her and the Countess hang out in like a parlor. And apparently after the Countess leaves, Edmund's been talking with her, because I'm guessing that they kind of just like snuck in. They're like, oh, Florian was just like, oh, Edmund's not actually with me, but I'm a friend of Edmund, so I can stay here. And I just have a friend with me who's totally not Edmund, but looks exactly like Edmund. And I think the man named Peter just didn't care. But they're chit-chatting, and he's like, I've been talking to the orphan Adeliza, who is so an orphan, and we are in love. I've been talking to her through metal bars, which I don't know why there would be metal bars in a parlor. Maybe they're the bars of the orphanage that she lives at? Unclear. But they've been talking through metal bars and near a parlor. Maybe simultaneously. Maybe like, I don't know. Logistics are weird on that one. But he wants to marry her and thinks that marrying her will get him back in his mom's good graces, because the orphan Adeliza is his mom's favorite orphan. So, of course, I would get them back in good graces with one another. So, because he wants to marry the orphan Adeliza, he needs to talk to the friars. And as he's going to, like, low-key harass the friars for a little bit, they're shuffling orphans into the church, and the orphans are singing a creepy song, and then they're not singing a creepy song. They're like, one of them stops and is talking to the friars and is like, I don't want to go in. You have to come with me because I'm scared of that statue. The statue is of the Count with, like, burning stars for eyes. It sounds creepy. I don't blame the little orphan for being like, I don't want to go in there without you because this is creepy. This is weird. I don't like this one bit. And the friar's like, whatever, go inside with the rest of them. Stuff is weird. But then we get orphan peril. A storm is happening, because of course a storm is happening. And lightning strikes the top of the church where the cross is, and it falls, and it almost kills these orphans. We have some good old orphan peril, which is great because orphans are creepy and sad, and therefore Gothicism, yes. The crucifix almost falling on the orphans, causes the Countess to go into crisis because she believes that God is punishing her for the crimes which she has committed. Nobody knows what crimes she has committed because she won't tell anybody. She just keeps saying, I've committed crimes. I must repent. I've committed crimes. And the friars are like, girly pop, what crimes did you commit? You should totally tell us. And she's like, no, I'm not going to tell you because I've committed crimes and I'm being punished by God. But it's okay because she goes to talk to Florian, who's kind of just like a messenger. He kind of disappears after a while, and we just don't really know where he goes. Or maybe we do know where he goes, but I just don't know where he went. The Countess talks to Florian, who is kind of being a messenger boy, and they're chit-chatting, and Florian tells the Countess, hey, my friend, who the man named Peter knows, but you don't know, you haven't seen him yet. My friend is in love with your favorite orphan Adeliza, and they want to get married. And the Countess still doesn't know her son is here. They've just kind of been avoiding each other, but have been there long enough for Edmund and Adeliza to have several conversations with each other and know that they're in love, even though Edmund is 32 and Adeliza's 16. That's not weird. That's not creepy. No, not at all. So this causes the Countess to fall more into grief, being like, I'm gonna lose the orphan Adeliza, and I've committed so many crimes that specifically affect Edmund and our favorite orphan, Adeliza, who's most definitely an orphan. And the Countess's crimes affect her, the orphan. Why would her crimes affect the orphan girl? Don't know. They just do, apparently. So she then goes and talks to Adeliza, and it's weird. This conversation is so weird. There's a lot of panting and a lot of exclamation points for play, which indicates like these women are frantically talking to one another and panting and like touching, and it's so weird. Like, why was this, why are you being so frantic? What's got you all hot and bothered like that? Is it the orphan Adeliza that's got this old ass lady so frantic and hot and bothered? It's weird. It gets weirder, but that's weird. That's pretty weird. Adeliza during this tells the Countess about a boy she wants to marry. And the Countess is like, okay, I already know that because I've talked to the boy you want to marry. Because the Countess thinks that Florian is the boy, not this friend. She thinks Florian was like my friend, meaning him. So the Countess thinks that Adeliza and Florian are in love with one another and want to get married. And they talk about this after the Countess sees her son for the first time and swoons. She doesn't faint. She swoons. She's like, "Is that the ghost of my dead husband?" And swoons. Not faints. Swoons. Which is weird. Why would you swoon at your son? Swooning is like a romantic thing. And I guess it's supposed to be like a opposite. Like, oh, I'm seeing somebody I'm not supposed to see. I must swoon. But it really comes across very weirdly, considering that it's her son. They talk about the marriage between Florian and Adeliza. Edmund doesn't correct her. Or maybe it's just kind of alluded to, but the Countess thinks that Florian and Adeliza are going to get married. And so she's like, okay, whatever. Not actually, but she's kind of like, okay, whatever. And one of the friars is like, oh, she doesn't know that it's Edmund who wants to marry Adeliza. But she keeps talking about these crimes that affect Edmund and Adeliza, so let's get them married, like, really, really quickly. So they get married really, really quickly. Edmund still thinks that this is going to get him back in his mom's good graces. So they go and seek the Countess for her blessing on their marriage, and she is horrified. She is like, what? You, my son, married my favorite orphan Adeliza, in whom I've committed crimes against both of you? And it's really, really iconic. It's horrible. Okay, it's horrible. But it's kind of iconic. They're like being like, why aren't you happy? Look upon your children, Countess. And she's like, I am looking upon my children. You are both my children. And they're like, what do you mean we're both your children? And she's like, this is an incest marriage. How dare you? And they're like, what do you mean this is an incest marriage? We don't know each other. We just met. I was born 16 years ago and I'm an orphan. That's what Adeliza says. Not actually, but that's what she says. And Edmund is like, what? I'm so confused. How is she my sister? What? And so the Countess then is like, okay, so after your dad died, I was so full of grief that I dressed up as the maid Beatrice, bringing her back, the maid Beatrice, and I got into your bed and we boned. This is weird. But she was so full of grief that she got into her son's bed, pretending to be the maid that he wanted to bone that night after his dad died. And they did it. And they had Adeliza. And it's all because Edmund looked so much like his father, and the Countess was so full of grief that she's like, I need to sleep with my husband one last time. What is the closest thing to sleeping with my husband I can get? Sleeping with my son. Sleeping with my 16-year-old son. And then having an incest baby, who I then give to the orphanage and then sponsor the orphanage and then keep her around a lot because she's my favorite orphan, because she's actually my daughter, now daughter-in-law. She's now my daughter-in-law. And Edmund is freaking out, and the Countess is freaking out. The Countess is freaking out to the point where she commits die in front of everybody. She just takes a dagger and stabs herself and is like, I cannot live with this. This is horrible. How could you guys have an incest marriage? And then dies. And Edmund is like, oh crap, we have an incest marriage. This is not cool. We shouldn't do this. This is horrible, but also this is Catholicism, and so we can't get divorced. Yes, the divorce was happening during this time, but not for them. They couldn't just go and get an annulment. They do stay married. So he took and sent his sister, daughter, wife to a nunnery so they could not consummate the marriage. And he went off to war because he would rather die than be married to his sister, daughter, wife. Even though that's his sister, daughter, wife. And that's just how the play ends. It's weird. Like, how did Edmund not just open up a window, let the moonlight in, see if the person in his bed had the same face as the person he was supposed to be sleeping with, because he knew the maid. He had to have known the maid. It was a maid. She was around the house all the time. Like why? Like how? Also the Countess. Why would you sleep with your son? Even, like, just why? Like, imagine being so full of grief that you're like, I need to dress up as another person and then sleep with my son. What? But they're both kind of weird for how they reacted to this whole thing. Not reacted. How it happened. Because if I were Edmund, I would simply, like, light a candle. Look at her in the moonlight. You know? It's weird. It's weird. Gothicism is weird. Talk more about Gothicism. Because it's weird. It's fun. It's weird. Don't sleep with your siblings. Or your parents. Because that's weird. Anyways.